I never imagined a single phone call could shatter what little thread was left tying me to my family, but that's exactly how it started. I'm Michael, 31 years old, a middle school teacher in a sleepy little beach town where life moves slower than molasses. My family, on the other hand, has always been a cyclone, noisy, messy, and somehow still convinced that chaos is just how we show love. Growing up, I learned pretty quickly that Brandon, my older brother, was the golden boy. He could crash the family car at 16 and get a new one by dinner. I once got a B+ on a math test and somehow ended up grounded for a month. Different standards, same last name. When Brandon announced he was marrying Ashley, some perky accountant he met through a corporate retreat, I genuinely wished him well. Cross my heart. I even offered to help with the wedding planning, despite knowing full well my suggestions would be treated like a toddler offering crayons to an architect. Turns out, I overestimated even that low bar. It was a Wednesday evening when Linda, my mother, called me. Her voice was tight, like she was trying to squeeze out words she didn't want to say. "Michael," she began, hesitating about the wedding. "Brandon thinks it might be better if you didn't come." I blinked, confused. "Didn't come? You mean like come late?" "Or no," she interrupted quickly, "not come at all." Silence. Heavy, ugly silence. I could practically hear Robert, my dad, muttering in the background, probably something about keeping the peace. Typical. Apparently, Brandon was worried I might stir up drama. Me, the guy who spent every holiday quietly sipping coffee in the corner while everyone else fought about politics or who forgot to bring the pumpkin pie. It stung, worse than I wanted to admit. But I did what I always did. I swallowed it down, smiled even though she couldn't see it, and said, "Sure, whatever makes Brandon happy." Linda sounded almost relieved. "Like dodging an emotional landmine. I knew you'd understand." Understand? Not exactly. But I understood enough. I wasn't welcome. Not really. Maybe I never had been. I hung up the phone, sat there for a while, staring at the wall, and thought, maybe it's time to stop pretending we're anything more than strangers with matching DNA. Instead of sulking at home, I did something I hadn't done in years. I booked a trip. Just me, a tiny suitcase, and a vague plan to forget my last name for a while. A few days later, I was walking barefoot along the beach, 100 miles away from the mess I left behind. The hotel where Brandon's wedding was supposed to take place, some over-decorated little place with too many fairy lights and not enough soul, was barely a speck on the horizon of my mind. While they were scrambling to play happy family in matching tuxedos, I was watching the sunrise paint the water gold. And for once, I wasn't just breathing, I was living. The day of the wedding came. I bought myself a ridiculous breakfast, pancakes piled higher than my dignity, and sat on the balcony of my cheap but cheerful motel, letting the salt air wash the bitterness off my skin. I figured they'd be too busy to notice my absence. Turns out, Karma noticed first. That afternoon, somewhere between my third iced coffee and an overdue nap, my phone rang. It was Robert. I let it buzz, because nothing good ever started with, "Hey buddy, we need to talk." Then another call. And another. Then texts started flooding in, one after another like angry waves. "Michael, emergency. Please call back. It's Brandon. It's bad. Ashley's having a meltdown. We need you." I stared at my screen, barely suppressing a laugh. The wedding was unraveling without me. Oh, the irony. Not 2 weeks ago, I was a liability to their perfect day. Now, apparently, I was their only hope. I leaned back in my chair, stretched my legs out, and took a long sip of my drink. The ocean didn't ask for apologies. It didn't send desperate texts. It just kept rolling in, peaceful and steady. Maybe it was trying to teach me something. I turned off my phone and let the waves be the only noise I answered to that day. When I finally turned my phone back on the next morning, it was like opening the gates of hell. Missed calls, 23 voicemails, texts from numbers I didn't even recognize, probably distant cousins I hadn't heard from since middle school, suddenly remembering I existed. The theme was the same across every desperate message. Michael, come home. We need you. Brandon needs you. Ashley's falling apart. The wedding is ruined. You have to fix this. Funny, isn't it? I was the liability, the invisible brother, the extra chair they didn't want at the head table. Now suddenly, I was the missing piece in their broken puzzle. I stared at the messages for a long time, sitting cross-legged on the motel bed, the cheap floral comforter scratching against my skin. Part of me, the old part, the trained part, wanted to answer. To say, of course, I'll be there. What can I do? The Michael they raised would have packed his bag without thinking, driven all night just to clean up a mess he didn't make. But that Michael wasn't here anymore. Still, for reasons I couldn't explain, I called Robert back. Maybe I needed to hear the desperation with my own ears. He picked up on the second ring, voice thick with panic. Michael, thank God. Listen, Brandon's not handling this. Ashley's locked herself in the bridal suite. She's refusing to come out. Half the guests already left. The hotel's threatening to sue over unpaid catering bills. It's a disaster. I leaned back against the headboard, twirling the motel room key around my finger. And you're calling me because... There was a pause. I could almost see Robert, standing somewhere outside that glitzy hotel, rubbing the back of his neck the way he always did when he knew he was full of it. Because you're good at this, he said finally. You're calm, logical. You can fix things. Fix things. That was it, wasn't it? That was always it. I wasn't the golden child. I was the janitor. Quiet, invisible, dependable Michael, sweeping up their wreckage with a smile, never invited to the party, just expected to clean up afterward. Something inside me, something brittle and buried, cracked. I'm on vacation, I said, voice light. Remember, you guys wanted me to stay away. Robert's voice sharpened, irritation slipping through the panic. Don't be childish. This is bigger than you, bigger than me. Right. When Brandon wanted to erase me from his perfect Instagram wedding, it was personal. When the fairy tale imploded, suddenly it was my responsibility to save the family from public humiliation. I let the silence stretch long enough to make him sweat. Michael, he tried again. Softer this time, please. You know how fragile Brandon is. He's under so much pressure. If you don't come, I don't know how he'll recover from this. Fragile. Brandon was fragile. The same Brandon who used to hold my head underwater in the pool until I cried uncle. The same Brandon who broke my glasses in 8th grade because nerds deserve it. Sure, let's call him fragile. Sorry, I said, smiling though my throat felt tight. I'm busy. I have a paddleboarding lesson in an hour. Michael! I hung up before he could finish. That should have been the end of it. But the next few hours felt like a siege, Linda called. I didn't pick up. Then she texted, Michael, this isn't the time to be selfish. Brandon needs his brother. Selfish. The word stung, even though it shouldn't have. Being selfish was cancelling someone's invite to the biggest day of their life and then expecting them to drop everything to clean up your mess. I tossed my phone onto the nightstand and stared at the ceiling, the cheap motel fan spinning lazily above me. Why did I still feel guilty? Why was it so hard to let go of people who clearly never held on to me in the first place? Because they're family. A voice whispered. Family. The magic word. The built-in guilt trip. The idea that no matter how badly they hurt you, you owe them your loyalty, your time, your soul. I thought about Brandon's wedding, about all the pictures they would have posted. if it hadn't gone up in flames. Photos the first wouldn't have been in. Memories the first wouldn't have been part of. Not by accident. By design, they made their choice. Maybe, for once, it was time I made mine. Later that night, there was a knock on my motel room door. For a second, my stomach twisted, some childish part of me wondering if Linda and Robert had driven all this way to drag me back like some runaway kid. Instead, it was the motel clerk holding out an envelope. "For you," he said, shrugging. Inside was a note, scrawled in Linda's handwriting. "We're desperate, Michael. We can't cover the hotel's cancellation fees. Brandon's crushed. Ashley's threatening to sue. Please, we're begging you to help. If you don't, we're finished." Attached was a copy of the hotel invoice. Total due $78,426.32. I let out a low whistle. 78 grand. For a wedding that didn't even happen, they wanted me to pay half. $39,000. For a party I wasn't even allowed to attend. The kind of absurdity that would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. I folded the invoice neatly, placed it back into the envelope, and set it on the nightstand. Then I packed my things, not to go back, to check into a nicer hotel further down the coast. If they wanted a saviour, they could find one somewhere else. I wasn't theirs anymore. Maybe I never had been. I moved into the nicer hotel that night, a small place perched right above the rocks, where the windows rattled with the sound of crashing waves. I didn't even unpack. Just dropped my bag by the bed and collapsed onto the mattress, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow and lazy, like it had nowhere better to be. For a while, I just lay there, letting the silence fill the room. No Brandon yelling, no Linda nagging, no Robert's heavy sighs about family duty, just the ocean and me. And the strangest thing, for the first time in years, I wasn't lonely. The next morning, my phone buzzed itself half to death on the nightstand. I ignored it. I went for a walk along the beach instead, letting the cold surf sting my ankles, watching tiny crabs scuttle across the sand. By the time I got back to the hotel, my voicemail was full again. First Linda, pleading in that high, breathless voice she used when she knew she was losing. Then Robert, sounding tired, worn down, like someone desperate enough to say anything. Then Brandon. He didn't bother with guilt trips or begging. No, Brandon went straight for the throat. "You're a coward," he snarled into the voicemail. "You're proving everyone right about you. You're selfish. You've always been selfish. And you're a failure, Michael, always have been." I listened to it twice, just to let it sink in. Selfish, failure, coward. Ironic coming from the guy who couldn't even get through his own wedding without a nervous breakdown. I deleted the voicemail without a second thought. Some part of me, the small, wounded part that still believed family meant something, hurt. But the bigger part felt nothing but a strange, cold relief. By nightfall, the texts got darker. "Don't think you're better than us. You'll regret this. Family is forever, Michael. You can't erase us." Funny thing about family, when you stop serving your role, when you stop being the scapegoat, the fixer, the ATM machine with a pulse, they don't beg you to stay. They try to destroy you on your way out. The final straw came 2 days later. I was having breakfast at a little cafe overlooking the cliffs when my phone buzzed with an incoming video. It was from Linda. Curious in spite of myself, I tapped it open. The video was shaky, poorly lit. It looked like someone had filmed a family emergency meeting in a hotel conference room. There was Robert at the head of a folding table, looking grim. There was Brandon, pacing like a caged lion. Ashley sat in the corner, crying noisily into a napkin. And there, standing awkwardly in front of the group, was the hotel manager, reading from a printed invoice about non-refundable fees, contract breaches, legal obligations. Linda's voice, sharp and pinched, cut through the background. If Michael cared about this family, he'd be here fixing this mess. Brandon chimed in, "Some people are just born broken." Robert just shook his head, murmuring something I couldn't hear. The manager cleared his throat awkwardly and ended the video. I set my phone down slowly. There it was, in black and white. The real reason they wanted me back. Not because they loved me. Not because they missed me. Because they needed a human shield. Someone to absorb the blame. Someone to hand over a check. Someone expendable. Not a brother. Not a son. Just a tool. A tool they thought they still owned. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I just sat there, sipping my lukewarm coffee, feeling a quiet finality settle over me like dust. It was over. Really, truly over. Not the kind of over where you storm out and slam doors, but secretly hope they chase after you. The kind of over where you know, bone deep, that you're never going back. I went back to the motel, packed my things neatly. Before I left, I typed one last message and sent it to the family group chat. I'm not your fixer, your scapegoat, or your wallet. I'm not the invisible son you dust off when it's convenient. I'm not part of this family anymore. You chose this the moment you uninvited me. You can live with the consequences. Goodbye, no screaming, no drama, no explanations, just a quiet, surgical cut. I blocked their numbers, deleted every thread of communication, booked a long road trip down the coast. No destination, no obligations, just the road and the ocean. As I drove away, I kept waiting for the guilt to crush me, the way it always had before. But it never came. Instead, all I felt was the slow, steady unfurling of something else. Freedom. Not the kind you announce to the world with fireworks and champagne. The quiet kind. The kind you feel in your chest when you realize the worst thing they could ever do to you already happened. And you survived. Better yet, you walked away. The first few days after I severed ties felt strange. Not good. Not bad. Just unfamiliar. Like learning how to walk again after dragging around a broken leg for years. My phone stayed eerily silent. No calls, no texts, no frantic apologies. For a brief, foolish second, I thought maybe they finally got the message. Maybe they were giving up, moving on. I should have known better. The first email came on the 4th day. Subject line, "We miss you." It was from Linda. A wall of text filled my screen, apologies so sugary they made my teeth hurt. Regrets about how things unfolded. Platitudes about family sticking together. Thinly veiled jabs implying that if only I had been less sensitive, none of this would have happened. Near the bottom, a casual suggestion. We've spoken to the hotel. They're willing to reduce the bill by 10% if we pay by Friday. Maybe you can cover your half, and we can all move on from this. My half. Still clinging to the idea that I owed them something, that I was obligated to fix their self-made catastrophe. I closed the email without replying. I knew better now. The second wave hit harder. 3 days after Linda's email, there was a knock at my door. I peeked through the window and, sure enough, there they were, Robert and Linda, standing awkwardly on the gravel driveway, looking 10 years older than the last time I saw them. Linda's eyes were red-rimmed. Robert was clutching a battered manila folder, like it contained the cure to cancer. I didn't open the door. Instead, I watched them from behind the curtain, silent, unseen, the way they had trained me to be my whole life. After a while, Linda slid a note under the door and they left. I waited an hour before picking it up. The note was short, hearse. Family is forever. You're hurting more than just yourself. Think about what you're throwing away. Taped to it was a copy of an old family photo, one of the rare ones where I hadn't been conveniently cropped out. Christmas, maybe 10 years ago. Brandon was front and centre, of course, arms slung casually around Linda and Robert, like a king flanked by loyal subjects. And me? Off to the side, half in shadow, grinning like I didn't know better yet. I studied that photo for a long time, feeling the old ache stir, the longing, the desperate, pathetic hunger for inclusion. But it didn't hook me this time. Not anymore. Because I finally understood something brutal and necessary. I wasn't the one throwing anything away. I had never been truly part of it. You can't lose what you never had. After that, I moved quickly. New phone number, new bank accounts, new mailing address. I even switched jobs, left the cramped middle school for a small tutoring company in town where nobody knew my last name or my family's failures. It felt like shedding a second skin, painful, freeing. Necessary. Brandon tried one last time, an email short and venomous. You'll regret this when you're old and alone. Family is all that matters. I didn't even open it, just deleted it. Regret? Maybe one day I would. Maybe there would be birthdays where the silence rang too loud. Maybe there would be hospital rooms where no familiar faces showed up. But even if that happened, even if loneliness came knocking, it still wouldn't be worse than living my whole life begging for scraps of love that were never real. I chose my own dignity over their conditional acceptance. And that, I realized, was a kind of love too, the rarest kind. The kind you give yourself when nobody else will. Months passed. The ocean got colder. The tourists thinned out. I kept walking the beach every morning, letting the salt and wind carve new patterns into my skin. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since college, back when dreams felt like possibilities instead of embarrassments. I made new friends, real ones, people who didn't measure my worth by how useful I was to them. I learned how to celebrate my own birthday, how to cook dinner for one without feeling sorry for myself, how to laugh at stupid jokes without scanning the room for approval. I built a life, brick by painful brick, without them. And strangely, beautifully, it was enough. The last thing I ever received from Linda was a Christmas card. It arrived late, postmarked from whatever new address they had scurried off to after the wedding fiasco bankrupted them. Inside, just 2 words, still family. No apology, no accountability. Just the same old guilt wrapped in tinsel and good intentions. I didn't bother responding. I slipped the card into a shoebox full of other scraps. Old report cards, faded birthday invites, snapshots of a boy who tried so hard to matter. Then I taped the box shut and shoved it to the back of the closet. Not because I was bitter, not because I wanted revenge, because some things don't need burning, they just need burying. If family is forever, then so is freedom. And for the first time in my life, I chose freedom. I chose me. And in the end, that was the best wedding I could have ever been invited to. The one where I married myself to my own damn peace. No guests required. Story 2. When I dropped off my daughter that evening, I had no idea it would be the last time I ever leaned on my parents for help. I was rushing, cramming my 3-year-old's favourite stuffed unicorn into her overnight bag with one hand, cradling my phone between my shoulder and ear with the other. Mom, I can't thank you enough. This presentation is everything for my career, I said, glancing at the growing checklist, pajamas, toothbrush, backup clothes, her worn security blanket. It felt excessive for one night, but peace of mind wasn't something I could skimp on. Across the room, my husband, Derek, stood tapping his watch. Jess, we have to go. Traffic's already building, he said, slinging the diaper bag over his shoulder. "1 sec," I mouthed back. On the phone, my mother's voice crackled through. "Of course, Jessica. Family first, you know that." Something about her tone made me pause, but I brushed it off. After 7 years of financial support, 1 night of babysitting didn't seem unreasonable. "We'll be there in 15, I said, ending the call. The drive was a blur of early evening sun filtering through the trees. In the back seat, my daughter Ella slept peacefully, her tiny fists clutching her unicorn. Every nerve in my body was buzzing. Tonight's presentation could mean a serious promotion, better schools for Ella, an actual college fund instead of a prayer, real security for once. "You ready?" Derek asked, squeezing my hand as we pulled into my parents' driveway. "Yeah," I said, unbuckling Ella. "Mum always comes through when it matters." Except this time, she didn't. My mother opened the door, her smile dimming the second she spotted the pink duffel bag. "What's all this?" she asked, crossing her arms. Confused, I stepped back slightly. "Ella's things for tonight. Remember? My presentation?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Jessica, we're not your babysitters anymore. We raised our kids. You need to figure it out." The words landed like a slap. Ella stirred against my chest, mumbling, "Gamma!" She reached for my mum, completely unaware of the rejection hanging thick in the air. Derek froze beside me, bag dangling from his hand. "But we talked about this," I said, my voice tight. "I said we'd talk. I didn't say we'd agree," my mother snapped. Laughter echoed from inside the house. I pushed past her instinctively, my heart pounding. "Who's here?" I asked, following the voices into the living room. There was my father, laughing with my younger brother's kids, building a block tower. My brother Andrew lounged on the couch, scrolling his phone without even glancing up. What's going on?" I croaked. Dad stood, clearing his throat awkwardly. "Didn't expect you to stop by," he mumbled. Andrew didn't bother looking up. "Mum and Dad are watching the twins tonight. Steph's out with friends. She needed a break." 7 years of subsidizing their rent. 7 years of quietly paying their car insurance. 7 years of just until we're back on our feet. Missed birthdays. Cancelled holidays. All flashing before my eyes. The night I paid for groceries out of my first paycheck at 21. The celebration dinner for my promotion that I funded, where they ordered lobster and champagne without blinking. Every ignored request to watch Ella because they were too busy. It solidified in one crushing, humiliating moment. Ella squirmed in my arms, reaching again for my mother. "Gamma!" she whispered. I tightened my grip around her and stepped back. "I see it now," I said, voice somehow steady. "I was never your daughter, just your wallet." "Jessica, don't be ridiculous," Mom snapped. "This isn't about money." "No," I said. "It's about worth." And I only had it when I was footing the bill. Without another word, Derek and I gathered Ella's things. There was no big scene, no screaming, just a heavy, terrible silence. The drive home was wordless. Ella slept again, unaware of the emotional wreckage in the front seat. When we pulled into our driveway, Derek turned off the engine and looked at me. "What now?" he asked. I met his gaze without hesitation. "I know exactly what we're going to do." That night, after Ella was tucked into bed, I opened my laptop. The glow from the screen lit up the living room. Derek sat quietly beside me, a hand resting on my knee. I pulled up my bank records. 7 years of automatic payments to my parents. Cancelled. Rent payments? Gone. Car insurance? Terminated. Phone plan? Shut down. With every click, I felt lighter, like cutting invisible strings I didn't even realize had been pulling me down. Next, I drafted a text to my parents and Andrew. From now on, handle your own expenses. I hit send. Then I blocked their numbers one by one. It felt ruthless. It felt final. It also felt necessary. At 6:15 and the next morning, the messages started. Unknown numbers. Voicemails. Emails. The first voicemail from Mum was panicked. Jessica, the rent didn't process. The landlord called. Call me. The second from Dad was sharp. Call me. Now. By the third voicemail, Mum's tone had shifted from concern to outright fury. You're abandoning your family. You're heartless. We could lose everything. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee as Derek read the messages aloud, each one more desperate than the last. They're spiraling, he said. I nodded. And I'm finally free. By noon, the attacks moved to social media. Mum's Facebook post was dripping with manufactured sadness, devastated. Our daughter, who we supported for years, has cut us off with no warning. Prayers appreciated during this difficult time. The comments flooded in. Some kids forget where they come from. Shame on her. We always knew Jessica was selfish. Andrew chimed in too. She always thought she was better than us. The guilt was a familiar ache, but this time it didn't win. Derek showed me his phone. Look, he said. In the sea of negativity, a few surprising voices appeared. Old neighbours, childhood friends, people who had seen the truth quietly for years. Proud of you for standing up for yourself, Jessica. Takes guts to set boundaries with family. Your parents lived off you too long. For the first time in years, the scales tipped. People saw it, really saw it. And it wasn't my burden anymore. By the end of the week, it was like my phone had turned into a war zone. Unknown numbers, fake emails. Facebook friend requests from profiles that had 2 photos and barely any friends. All trying to get through to me. I didn't answer. I didn't engage. They wanted chaos. I gave them silence. Meanwhile, Derek and I were busy doing something way more important. Living. It's strange, the things you notice when you're not drowning in someone else's emergencies. The house felt bigger somehow. The air felt lighter. Even Ella started sleeping better, no random wake-ups, no sudden tears. I opened up my banking app one morning and just stared. No withdrawals, no overdraft fees. No surprise emergency payments to cover someone else's poor planning. For the first time since I was 21, my paycheck was mine. Mine. We celebrated the quiet way. Derek made pancakes. Ella spilled syrup everywhere. We danced in the kitchen to some terrible pop song, and I laughed so hard I cried. Freedom didn't look like fireworks. It looked like pancakes and sticky fingers and laughing until your sides hurt. Of course, my parents weren't done trying. Mum showed up at my office. Security called me before she even made it to the elevators. There's a woman here claiming she's your mother, the guard said, sounding half amused, half concerned. I don't want to see her, I said. Escort her out, please. He didn't even hesitate. Later, I heard from a coworker that she made a whole scene downstairs, crying, shouting about betrayal, about how her daughter had been brainwashed by a bad husband. I guess when the manipulation didn't work, they went for slander. Classic. That night, while Ella built a fort out of couch cushions, Derek and I sat at the dining room table with 2 cups of coffee and a stack of paperwork. I think it's time, he said. I nodded. We filed for a formal cease and desist, blocked the last loopholes, changed phone numbers, updated our security system. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was just done. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar. My mother's loops and swirls, trying to be neat. It was 4 pages long. It was full of guilt trips. Your father's blood pressure is sky high because of you. If anything happens to him, it'll be your fault. Family is forever. You can't just walk away. I read the first page. Then I put it down and poured myself a glass of wine. Somewhere in the distance, Ella giggled. That's what mattered. Not the guilt, not the fear. Her laughter. Our peace. My therapist, Dr. Lacey, said it best when I showed her the letter. They're not asking for forgiveness, she said. They're demanding submission. That hit harder than I expected. Because it was true. They didn't miss me. They missed what I gave them: money, stability, a crutch they didn't have to work for. The next week, we took Ella to visit a daycare we'd always dreamed about, but never thought we could afford. It had everything: music classes, a giant outdoor playground, warm teachers who bent down to her level when they spoke. When I wrote the check for the deposit, my hands didn't shake. It felt right. Like reclaiming something I didn't even realize I'd lost. We also booked a weekend away, a cabin in the mountains. Fireplace, hiking trails, a little lake nearby. Nothing fancy, nothing Instagram worthy. Just peace. It was the kind of trip that would have been selfish according to my parents. Because I wasn't supposed to enjoy my money, I was supposed to sacrifice. Always, but not anymore. The morning we left for the cabin, I got another text from an unknown number. You're going to regret this. I didn't even open the message. I just deleted it and turned my phone off. At the cabin, Ella collected rocks and tried to name every squirrel she saw. Derek grilled steaks outside, while I curled up by the fire with a book I hadn't had time to read for months. Nobody screamed at me. Nobody demanded money. Nobody made me feel like I wasn't enough unless I was giving enough. It was just life. Simple, quiet hours. On the second night, after Ella finally fell asleep clutching her unicorn, Derek pulled me close. You did the right thing, he said quietly. I nodded, but part of me still felt raw. It shouldn't have had to be like this, I whispered. He didn't argue. He just held me tighter. Later, we sat outside on the porch. It was cold enough that I could see my breath, and the stars stretched endlessly overhead. You know, I said, wrapping a blanket around myself, they're probably back home right now, scrambling, panicking, blaming each other. Derek chuckled. Good. Maybe they'll finally learn something. I smiled a little. Maybe. But that's not my problem anymore. He bumped his shoulder against mine. Nope, it's not. And just like that, I let it go. The guilt, the shame, the endless, crushing responsibility that was never mine to carry. It drifted away into the cold mountain air, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel broken without them. I felt whole. When we got back from the cabin, everything felt different. Not because anything big had changed, but because I had. Before, I would have come home dreading the next shoe to drop. Now, I opened the door, carried Ella inside, and breathed easy. No calls, no threats, no emergencies that weren't mine. Just sunlight spilling into our living room, the smell of fresh laundry, and the sound of my daughter singing to her stuffed unicorn. I could get used to this. I did get used to it. The first real test came a few days later. I was walking out of the grocery store, balancing a bag of apples on one hip and Ella's hand in mine, when I spotted someone across the parking lot. My Aunt Karen. She saw me before I could duck behind the car. Jessica, she called out, waving like nothing had happened. I considered pretending I didn't hear her. I considered running, but I didn't. I stood there, solid as a rock, and waited. She hurried over, clutching a casserole dish covered in foil. Typical. They always thought food could patch over broken trust. I heard what happened, she said. Fake sweet. Your mother's been beside herself, your poor father. His blood pressure, I cut her off. I hope they're okay, I said, voice calm. But their choices are their own, she blinked, thrown off by how steady I was. No matter what, family sticks together, she said, like it was some sacred rule. I smiled. Sometimes, I said. Sometimes family sticks knives in your back and expects you to say thank you. She gasped like I'd slapped her. I didn't stay to hear whatever excuse was coming. I helped Ella into the car, loaded the groceries, and drove off without looking back. Later, Derek and I joked about it. You could have just taken the casserole, he said, laughing. And what? Start the guilt buffet? I teased back. We laughed. Really laughed. The kind that makes your stomach hurt in the best way. It wasn't all easy. Some nights, when the house was quiet and the world felt big and lonely, I missed the idea of family. Not the reality. The idea, the dream I clung to for so long, that if I just loved harder, sacrificed more, they would finally see me as enough. It was hard letting that dream die. Hard, but necessary. My therapist said grieving the family you wanted is just as real as grieving a death. Some nights I cried for the girl I used to be. The one who thought unconditional love meant bending until you broke. The one who thought sacrifice would buy safety. But I always woke up stronger, and I kept building a life that didn't revolve around begging for scraps. 3 months after we cut ties, Ella started her new daycare, the one with music classes and nature walks, and teachers who sent home sweet little notes about how kind she was to the other kids. Derek and I took weekend trips. We went to farmers' markets, we painted the kitchen a stupid bright yellow that made us smile every morning. We lived. And the best part, nobody could take that from us. Not long after, I got a letter from my mother. No big speech this time, just a few lines, written in shaky handwriting. I didn't know how much damage I was doing. I thought I was surviving. I see now that I wasn't. I'm sorry. No demands, no manipulation, just regret. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, turning the letter over in my hands. Derek found me there. You okay? He asked. I nodded. I think she means it, I said. But, he prompted. But it doesn't mean I have to let her back in, he smiled sadly. Exactly. I didn't call. I didn't write back. Forgiveness, I realized, didn't require a reunion. It didn't require setting myself on fire to keep someone else warm. It just required letting go of the weight they tried to hand me. I wasn't carrying it anymore. That fall, we bought a little house on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, nothing people would ooh and ah over, but it had a big backyard for Ella to run in, a cozy fireplace for chilly nights, a small garden where we grew tomatoes that tasted like sunshine. It was ours. One afternoon, I stood at the kitchen window, watching Derek push Ella on the swing we built together. She squealed with laughter, her hair flying everywhere. And I realized this is what family looks like, not obligation, not guilt, not debt, joy, safety, freedom, a life built on love, not fear. Later that night, I tucked Ella into bed. She clutched her unicorn and mumbled, half asleep, Gamma. My heart twisted. I sat on the edge of her bed and brushed her hair back. Maybe one day, I whispered. Maybe one day if they earn it. Because forgiveness wasn't off the table, but it was no longer free. It had conditions now, honesty, respect, effort, things that should have been there all along. Derek found me there, sitting quietly in the dark. You ready for movie night? He asked, holding up a bag of popcorn. I smiled and followed him down the hall. As we curled up on the couch, I glanced at the wall where we hung family photos. Us at the pumpkin patch, Ella's first day at daycare, our first Christmas in the new house. No faked smiles. No forced poses. Just real, messy, beautiful life. I leaned my head on Derek's shoulder and exhaled. I think we're going to be okay, I said. He kissed my forehead. We already are. And for the first time in a long, long time, I believed it. Story 3. Standing in the entryway of the house I grew up in, I couldn't help but stare at the walls. They were practically a shrine to my sister. Chloe's high school valedictorian photo, Chloe's wedding day, Chloe's first baby shower. Not a single picture of me, not even a glimpse. It was like I didn't exist unless they needed something. You'd think after 34 years it would stop stinging, but nope, the ache had a nasty way of sneaking up on me. From the kitchen, I heard my mum call out, her voice slicing through my nostalgia like a dull knife. Emily, that you, help me with the appetizers, honey. I hadn't come to play server. I hadn't come to be the extra, the afterthought, the unpaid help. I had come to set things straight, something I should have done years ago. Still, I wandered into the kitchen. Mum was a hurricane, arranging trays and mumbling about Chloe's big night, her promotion to senior project manager at some tech startup. Another event where Chloe would be celebrated like royalty, while I, Emily, full scholarship graduate, financial analyst, single mother to an incredible 7-year-old boy named Caleb, remained invisible. Here, Mum shoved a tray at me. Finish these. Chloe will be here any minute. And your dad bought the wrong crackers. Chloe likes multigrain, not plain, no thanks, no hello. Just orders. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Sharon, my former mother-in-law. Did you tell them yet? She texted. I hadn't. Not yet. How do you tell your parents you're done funding their lives? How do you explain that the reason their grandson, Caleb, didn't include them in his family tree project wasn't an accident? It was deliberate. The front door slammed. Heavy boots pounded down the hall. Emily, Dad grunted. No eye contact, no hug. Where's your mum? Chloe will be here soon. In the bedroom, getting ready, I said, arranging crackers in robotic silence. Dad gave a distracted nod and disappeared into the living room. Classic! As I placed the last cracker, memories flooded in. Memories of being 17 and getting into Stanford on a full ride. Memories of standing in this exact kitchen, holding that acceptance letter like it was my ticket to finally being seen. Dad's reaction? Stanford's too far. You should stay close to help your mother. Chloe needs support with her dance classes. I went anyway. I built a life anyway, and they never forgave me for it. When my ex, Jason, left me 3 years ago for a woman he met at work, I thought, for once my parents would rally behind me. Help me. Be there. Instead, Mom called and said, well, maybe you were too focused on your career. Men don't like feeling second place. Meanwhile, Sharon and her husband, Mark, Jason's parents, practically adopted me and Caleb. They picked him up from school when I had late meetings, took him to the zoo, brought me soup when I had the flu. They were family. Blood be damned. 6 months ago, Mom and Dad suddenly started calling every week. Sunday dinners, babysitting offers. It felt suspicious. I wanted so badly to believe they'd changed, that maybe, just maybe, they realised what they'd lost. Then Chloe's promotion happened. The calls, the visits, the sudden interest. It wasn't love. It was strategic. They needed money. Again. Mum breezed back into the kitchen, decked out in a new blouse I knew I had paid for. Emily, finish setting out the drinks, will you? Chloe's almost here. Instead of moving, I straightened my spine. We need to talk, I said. Mum paused, wary. Can it wait until after Chloe's celebration? It can't. I looked her dead in the eye. I'm done. No more money. No more covering your mortgage. No more credit card bailouts. No more car payments. I'm cutting it all off. her face drained of colour, as if she genuinely thought this day would never come. What? What are you talking about? She stammered. We barely ask you for anything. A bitter laugh escaped my throat before I could stop it. Really? You think paying your car loan for 5 years is barely? The Hawaii trip? The new roof? The new washer-dryer? Who do you think paid for all of that? Her lips flapped uselessly. No words, just shock and entitlement. After all we've done for you, she finally spat. Done for me, I repeated. You mean existing? Feeding me? Giving me shelter? You mean doing the bare minimum a parent should do? Footsteps in the doorway. Dad appeared, face dark and impatient. What's all this? Emily's saying she's cutting us off financially. Mum practically wailed. Dad scowled at me as if I were the problem, as if I were ungrateful. This about that emergency room thing again, he said. We told you Chloe needed us that night. It was her big promotion dinner. I froze. The memory hit like a sledgehammer. 6 months ago. Appendicitis. Ambulance ride. Excruciating pain. Alone. Caleb stranded at school because I had no one to pick him up. I had called Mum in a panic. We're at Chloe's dinner, she had said, voice dripping with irritation. You can't expect us to leave. I could barely speak through the morphine fog, but I managed. I have no one else. You're being dramatic, she said. Jason should pick him up. Or that ex-mother-in-law of yours. We can't leave Chloe hanging. And then the final blow. Caleb's, he's just so much work. Their grandson, their only grandson. A burden. Sharon had dropped everything, picked up Caleb, sat in the hospital overnight, held my hand, held my son. She didn't share my blood, but she shared something more important, love. I came back to the present, staring at these two people who expected me to sacrifice myself indefinitely for them. I'm done, I said again, quieter but steadier. No more money, no more support. Mum's face twisted in desperation. But the mortgage, your father's medications. Chloe just bought a new car. She can't help. I cut her off with a shrug. Not my problem. Right then, the front door swung open. Chloe burst in, carrying a bottle of champagne, all smiles and fresh curls. Hey, did I miss anything? Mum plastered on a fake smile so fast it was almost impressive. Nothing, sweetie. Emily was just leaving. I grabbed my bag and headed toward the door. Chloe called after me, confused. I didn't know you were coming tonight. Stay for a bit. I gave a polite smile. Just stopped by to say congratulations. And I meant it. Chloe wasn't the villain. Not really. She had just been handed the starring role while I was shoved backstage. I didn't stay for the celebration. I walked out of that house, out of that life, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. 3 months. That's how long it had been since I walked out of their house without looking back. No calls, no guilt-tripping texts, nothing. At first, the silence was loud, deafening, honestly. I kept waiting for the hammer to fall, a snide message, a pitiful voicemail, but it didn't come. And slowly, day by day, I realized something. Peace isn't loud. It's quiet. It's Caleb laughing in the backyard with Sharon's dog. It's sipping coffee on a Sunday morning without checking my phone every 5 minutes, bracing for some family emergency. It was the life I should have had all along. That Tuesday afternoon, I was folding laundry, Caleb's tiny soccer jerseys, still stained from last weekend's game, when my phone buzzed. Mom, I just stared at it. I almost didn't answer. God, I wanted to decline it so bad. But some stubborn part of me, the old Emily, the one that used to bend over backward, hoping maybe this time they'd care, made me pick up. Hello? A beat of silence. Then her voice, stiff and formal. "Emily, we need to talk." I sat down on the bed, heart steady for once. There's nothing left to talk about. Another beat. I could hear her breathing. Could almost picture her sitting at the kitchen table, wringing her hands, calculating every word. "It's about the house," she said finally. "The mortgage is 2 months overdue. The bank is sending letters. Not my problem. And your father's truck got repossessed last week," she added, voice cracking just enough to seem genuine. But I knew better now. "Not my problem." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, meaning it in the cold, detached way you're sorry when it rains on someone else's picnic. "Emily, please, we're family." I closed my eyes. Family. Funny word. Funny how it only seemed to mean something when they needed me. I thought about Caleb's school project, the one he had worked on last month. A family tree. At the top, he had put Sharon and Mark. Below them, me and Jason. Below us, him. No Chloe, no Mum and Dad, just the people who showed up. "You have Chloe," I said simply. Silence. "She said no," Mum muttered. "Said she just bought a house and can't help." Ah, there it was. Chloe's loyalty crumbling when her own wallet was on the line. "Then you'll figure it out," I said. "You can't just abandon us," she snapped, dropping the wounded act like a bad disguise. "I'm not abandoning anyone," I said, voice calm. "I'm finally choosing myself." And then I hung up, blocked the number. Sat there in the warm sunlight of my room, breathing in the clean, guiltless air. Across the hall, Caleb was sprawled on the carpet, building a Lego spaceship. I watched him for a minute, the way his brow furrowed when a piece didn't fit, the way he grinned when he figured it out. "Hey, buddy," I said, standing up. "Want to go out for burgers tonight?" His whole face lit up. Yes, simple, joyful, uncomplicated. That's what life should feel like. A few days later, Sharon texted me. "Mark's making his famous chili sundae. You two better show up or he'll sulk." I smiled at the screen. Family, real family. Not the kind that tallies up debts and guilts you into dinners. The kind that just wants you there because they love you. No strings attached. That Sunday, Caleb and I showed up at Sharon's house. He ran straight to the backyard to kick a soccer ball around with Mark. Sharon hugged me like I was her own daughter because, in all the ways that mattered, I was. Over dinner, they told stories. They teased each other. They asked about my job, my upcoming projects, Caleb's science fair. They listened, really listened. And when I offered to help clean up, Sharon waved me off. "Your family. Sit down and relax." That night, driving home, Caleb asleep in the back seat, his hair sticking to his forehead from all the running around, I realized something else. I had spent years trying to earn my parents' approval, years paying their bills, picking up their slack, hoping that if I just did enough, they'd finally love me the way they loved Chloe. But love isn't something you buy. Love isn't transactional. Love is staying overnight in a hospital with someone. Love is folding little soccer jerseys without being asked. Love is a warm kitchen and a chair at the table without having to beg for it. And the best part? You get to choose who you call family. Blood? It's biology. But family? That's heart. That's action. That's love. You don't have to earn. I was done fighting for crumbs from people who never even set a place for me. I was building something better. For me. For Caleb. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't scared. I was free. Weeks slipped by like pages in a book you can't put down. Life wasn't perfect. It never is. But it was ours. And for the first time, it felt light. Caleb had his school's art show coming up, and he was buzzing about it for days. He made this messy, colourful painting of a tree, roots, branches, the whole thing, and insisted it was our family tree. When I asked him to explain it, he tapped the biggest branch first. "That's you, Mum." Then a thick root winding down into the earth. "That's Grandma Sharon and Grandpa Mark. They keep us strong." He showed me the smaller branches, one for Sharon's dog, one for his best friend Toby, one even for Mrs. Alvarez, his favourite teacher. No mention of my parents. No mention of Chloe. I didn't prompt him. I didn't correct him. He just knew. Kids always know who shows up. That night, after tucking Caleb in, I sat outside on the porch. The spring air was cool against my skin, and the stars blinked lazily overhead. I thought about the old tree in my parents' backyard, the one Dad planted when Chloe was born. They used to take pictures under it every year for her birthday. I thought about all the times I asked if we could take pictures too. "Maybe next year," they'd say. "Let's not make everything about you, Emily. Little cuts, one after another. You tell yourself they're not deep enough to kill you, but they add up. Until one day you realise you're bleeding out and they're too busy posing for another photo to notice." I wasn't mad anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was just done. Done chasing people who didn't know how to love without conditions. Done trying to squeeze water from a dry well. Done begging to be seen. They taught me a lesson, sure. Just not the one they thought. They taught me how not to love. They taught me what not to accept. And in some twisted way, I was grateful for that, because Caleb would grow up knowing different. He would never have to wonder if he was enough. He would never have to earn my pride or my presence. He already had it. A few months later, Sharon threw a barbecue for Caleb's 8th birthday. It wasn't Pinterest perfect. No balloon arches, no catered cupcakes, no Instagram moments. Just burgers, backyard soccer, a homemade cake leaning a little too far to the left. It was perfect. When it came time to blow out the candles, Sharon pulled me aside. "You've done good, Emily," she said quietly. "Real good." For a second, my throat tightened. Because when you've gone your whole life without hearing that, when you've been running a marathon for approval you'll never get, those words hit different. I squeezed her hand. "We've all done good," I said, "because this messy, imperfect, beautiful little family we'd built, it wasn't a solo act. It was a team effort. It was love, passed around like plates of barbecue and slices of slightly crooked cake." Later that night, after the guests had left and Caleb was asleep, I sat on the porch again. Same chair, same cool air brushing against my skin. I thought about my parents. I wondered if the foreclosure notices had come yet. If Chloe was still keeping her distance. If they ever sat in their silent house, surrounded by empty picture frames, and realised what they had lost. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. It didn't matter anymore. Their story didn't define me. Their choices didn't chain me. I was writing a new story now, and Caleb was part of every page. One last thing happened before I closed this chapter for good. About a year after I cut them off, I got a letter. Old-fashioned, in the mail, no return address. I knew it was from my mum the moment I saw the handwriting. Inside was a 2-page letter, mostly guilt-tripping. A few apologies sprinkled in like seasoning on a burnt meal. But the part that stuck with me was the ending. "We're still your parents. Family is forever." I read it twice, folded it up, set it aside, and then I sat down and wrote my own letter. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't angry. It was honest. I told them that family isn't made by blood. It's made by love. By showing up. By staying when it's hard. I told them that Caleb is growing up happy and whole, and that's the greatest revenge I could ever ask for. I told them I wished them peace. And then I mailed it back, no forwarding address. No phone number, no invitation to try again. Sometimes closure isn't a dramatic confrontation. Sometimes it's a quiet door closing and locking it behind you. I leaned back in my chair, listened to the night sounds, crickets, the hum of distant cars, Caleb's soft breathing through the open window. And for the first time in my whole life, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged.